Hey, how's it going, guys? Ancient Rune here, back with another Once Human build video, and today I'll be going over my Corrosion build. This is a top tier shotgun that clears silos pretty easily with its high single target damage, as well as the gear being very easy to set up with all of its easy crit rate, as well as having tons of options for damage boost with its diverse formula. This version is focused on staying at high HP instead of the low HP meta, as it's something I don't enjoy, and I like being able to take a couple hits. So with that, you will see my overall DPS being lower than others, but still more than viable to clear content easily. But despite that, I will still mention options for low HP with lunar mods and other things, as well as being able to take advantage of the downstar mods and the related starfall inversion tech. I also want you to keep in mind the damage I am showing is not peak for my build, as I am still farming for even better rolls, but the base build itself works amazing, so you can hit even better results than me. Now, let's get into it. Alright, so this is an interesting gun. This has an 80% chance to trigger Power Surge with a hit, but it will not inflict Power Surge status on defense. This just means like the dot, like the critical pulse, it won't do that kind of dot thing. And then Power Surge can deal crit hit damage, and it has a crit rate of plus 25%. So this adds crit damage to our formula on top of the elemental and status that Power Surge usually gets, as well as the PSI intensity. When Power Surge is triggered, Power Surge crit damage is increased by 40%. Effects can stack up to 5 times. So you easily have 200% crit damage for Power Surge. And then you have a Power Surge damage factor of plus 15%. Then when we look at Power Surge, you'll see it has continuous debuff and instant damage. So this here is going to be instant damage, and it will deal status effect damage of 50% PSI intensity once and inflict Power Surge status for 6 seconds. This status does not happen on the Deviants. And it is shock element type. The additional damage cannot crit naturally, but with this it can. Cannot crit weak spots and will not decay with distance. Then the actual factor is 50% times 1 plus Power Surge damage factor times 1 plus Power Surge final damage bonus. So what we're looking for is crit damage, status damage, and elemental damage. What we're also looking for is weapon damage, because what people did with math that are not my own, and I asked a couple people, is that it's actually good to focus on more the crit and weapon damage. You'll see on my stuff here, I've got crit and weapon damage. The DPS ended up being better, which was shocking to me, but I trust the people that do all the testing. So we'll be making some interesting choices here that you will see while I go over this video. For the calibration, I like to go the rapid shot style, as this just gives more fire rate. There is also the one that gives more magazine size, but I much prefer the fire rate DPS. It does decrease attack, but that will not affect the direct power surge, even if the attack is part of our DPS here. Then you have a good amount of options. Normally you think, because it's crit stuff, you'd go the crit rate on the calibration, but we actually have so much crit rate that we don't need to. So what you can do is go elemental or crit damage. I don't have a lot of elemental damage here, and there's some stuff I could do to get more. So right now I just have elemental damage. I've heard that crit damage is better here, but I also just don't have a good crit damage one, so I'm just going elemental bonus here. Then for the accessory with the muzzle, I go the quick flame break, as this goes increased accuracy, unfortunately decreased stability, but this accuracy is very, very nice. And then we go the tactical laser sight for the increased accuracy, and then we have just one drum mag here with the increased mag size but decreased reload speed. And for the ammo, you are looking for blasting shotgun AP ammo, as this will increase PSI intensity when triggering shock, which is power surge. Then you also have the other stuff like phantasmal, suppression, penetration, and peregrine that are all going to help increase your damage. Now, it's not always easy to get this ammo, so I just go the basic tungsten AP ammo, but it just depends on what you want to do. For the secondary, I go the Bingo, as this has a 70% chance to trigger Bullseye upon hitting a weak spot. But the main thing is, after switching weapons, the first hit will trigger Bullseye. And then after hitting a non-meta human unit, the weak spot damage is increased. While you'll see on this build, that part doesn't matter. And so the main thing here is going to be the after switching weapons. Because you really only need the Bullseye during bossing, you can just hold your main gun, whip it out, shoot, and then swap back, and then start shooting your weapon and dealing your damage while having Bullseye automatically applied. You can also go the Wildfire, that just has a 60% chance to trigger a Bullseye when hitting a target, but for that one swap, shoot, and then swap back, the Bingo is going to be better. Now, usually with crit rate builds, you'd also go the recurve crossbow, as this gives increased crit rate and applies Bullseye. But again, we have so much crit rate that this is not needed. The only time crit rate could be good is to boost your gun's crit rate a little bit more, but really it's just a power surge crit rate you really need. And then what is Bullseye? Well, this is a continuous debuff that gives 8% vulnerability, which is just a damage boost, to highlighted marked enemies, and they will have an outline. So this is just a free damage boost here. Then for the melee weapon, we are looking at the Kukri. This is especially good on this build, so you're benefiting from all of its bonuses. When defeating an enemy, you grant all weapons increased attack and crit rate for 10 seconds, and then defeating an enemy with a heavy strike increases PSI intensity by 20%. So we got our base shots getting the attack, and then both things getting crit rate, and then our power surge getting the PSI intensity. And how you can keep this up is going to be with the sticky ice crystal. This, when you hit it with the Kukri, will count as an enemy kill. You just got to hold down the melee, and it will get you that buff. And how you get the sticky ice crystal is going to be from the ice spot deviation, which you can get from the endless stream or way of winter scenario, and you'll see here it's producing them here. Then for the deviations, we have a couple options, but really a main one here is going to be the mini feaster. This will give increased status damage, which we do not have a lot of on this build because we're focused on a lot of crit damage. So this is going to be a huge thing here. This will be big boost. And then I have a Starfall one, so we also get a tiny bit more status damage here, plus 5%, and then while airborne, another plus 2.5%. So at max here with this level 5, you can get the 87.5% status damage, which is great. Now for other options, if you don't have that, you can go the Lone Wolf or the Zap Cam, as this will both give increased weapon damage, which boosts your base shots. Really what you'd go with Lone Wolf is you'd go this as the main one for weapon damage if the Lone Wolf can hit the enemy, and it'll also be a nice aggro draw. And then if Lone Wolf can't hit the enemy, then the Zap Cam will be the big thing for the weapon damage boost. And now with the gear, we have the key gear here and the only option, which is the Gas Mask Hood. After triggering Power Surge, crit rate is increased by 35% and Power Surge damage increased by 50% for 6 seconds. And since we're always triggering Power Surge, we will easily keep up this crit rate and damage. So this crit rate is huge for both our Power Surge and our base bullets. And then for the gear sets, you're going to want to go 3-piece Lone Wolf and then 2-piece Savior Top, as the Lone Wolf will give us max size and crit rate being the big thing, but it'll also give even more crit damage. And I messed with getting some weapon damage instead on this, and just having more crit damage is great because it applies to both the shots and the Power Surge. And then the saviors here for the medicine cooldown haste, and then also the status damage. Getting more of that is always nice. But I'm really here for the medicine cooldown, as this is a high HP build. But if you wanted to go low HP, then you can go 3-piece treacherous for the up to 50% weapon damage and status damage, which is huge. And then we have the Lone Wolf with 2-piece just to get that crit rate. If you wanted to just go slightly lower HP, you could go 2-piece treacherous and then 3-piece Lone Wolf, but it's not better damage than going the 3-piece treacherous. And then for the mask hide, a big thing here will be the Lucky Rabbit Fur, as this gives elemental damage, which we don't have too much of, but we do have ways of getting. Now, what's really good with this is that it's after storing a crit, and I don't have this on my mask, and that's one of the things where I have elemental damage on my calibration to help make up for that. But you could maybe possibly go Dreamy Rabbit Fur as well. You have the Rabbit Fur here that's just base elemental, but I wouldn't. I have Golden Wool just because it's what I have on my mask and it's easy for me to get, which has a weapon damage and status damage fluctuating with a total of 12%. So we're always getting good boosts because we have the status damage, which applies to a power surge, and the weapon damage that boosts the base bullets. But you could also just go like Starfall down if you wanted to, with the status damage while airborne as well. And then you also have like Lunar Rabbit Fur or the Lunar Wool when available. All right, now before we get into everything about the mods, if you have enjoyed this video so far, make sure to like the video and consider subscribing and maybe become a member to get videos early and just support the channel. So now with our mask and our weapon here, we are going to go with Power Surge, as we will get the Power Surge damage boost, which is a huge boost. And then you can also go damage to targets with Power Surge. From what I've been told, this applies to enemies even though it's not applying a dot to them. So they will have the Power Surge status, yet they still get this bonus. And this is against X enemy types, which is the same as like Elite and Great Ones. So this is really good as it's not specific like these, and it gets to a higher bonus. Now, some other stuff you could go is like Power Surge crit damage or even shock damage. I don't know which one's better if you could get like the third one, but you really want to focus on Power Surge damage and then damage to targets with Power Surge, and then either normal, elite, or great ones. And then something interesting on here, I mentioned it a little bit in the beginning of the video, is we're mainly going to be looking for crit damage and weapon damage, whether that be Violent or Downstar or the Lunar. And because we're doing this, some people, not myself, tested it. I know Mon did a damage calculator. The crit damage here plus the weapon damage is just better DPS than going like talents, which you would think you would go because it's an elemental and it gets elemental in status. So why wouldn't you go this? But apparently just combining the base hits and boosting the hits of just your gun as well is very good. Even though we're adding so much crit damage to this, it is apparently worth it. And I trust nerds. I'm a nerd, super nerds in other games, and these are, I'm assuming, the super nerds of this game. So I will trust that info. So we're getting that crit damage and the weapon damage for everything. And I do want to point out that Power Surge here is not benefiting from weapon damage. It is only getting the crit damage and then the elemental and status damage here, as well as the regular Power Surge stuff. Now for the helmet and the top, if you were going low HP, you can go the Lunar mods, as this will have the crit damage and weapon damage here, and then you'll want to go the Elite, Great Ones, or Normal. Now you could possibly mix up with some elemental or status in here, like if you get a good one maybe, but I don't have like a damage calculator like other people, and it may just be like a good enough thing because Lunar mods can suck the farm nowadays. And now with the pants and the boots, we have Downstar. Now there's not much reason not to go Downstar because the percentages are the same as the made ones with Violent and Talents. So Downstar is just easy to get as well. So we go this, and then you can potentially get a little bit more damage boost, where we have the crit damage and weapon damage. And just like Lunar, you could go some elemental status, but I've been told crit damage and weapon damage is better, so I'd do that. Then you have the normal, elite, and great ones here. Then for the gloves, or if you just don't want to go with anything previously mentioned, we have Violent. This will just give crit damage and weapon damage, nothing special. And then we have the damage against normal enemies, elite, and great ones. Now some tips. If you are going low HP with Lunar, you can use stuff like the Sanity Corrosion capsules, lower sanity, or some other things that will lower it. And then with the Starfall inversion and downfall stuff, you can use the Gravity Neutralizer. This will hold you in place in midair The Starfall inversion is active right now, so I'm going to have really high jump height, but we can still get the point across. So I'll activate this here, and then I'll jump, and then I'll hold jump again, and now I'm mid-air, benefiting from airborne, or if I'm higher than enemies for downstar, then I'm benefiting from that. Or you can be over the shoulder, and you are still in the air, or aim down sights, and you are still in the air. Now for the actual mods, we are going to go Shock Rampage here, as this will increase our Power Surge trigger chance by 20% after triggering Power Surge. And this is really good because we're adding it to this 80%. So that's, if it's additive, then that's 100% trigger chance, which is huge. And that's why we'd go that over something like Surge Amplifier that just increases Power Surge damage, or Static Shock, which increases Power Surge damage as well here. Then for the secondary with our Bullseye weapons, we are going Vulnerability Amplifier, as this will increase our Bullseye damage by 8%. So instead of the 8% at base, it is now 16%. And then for the Kukri, I just go a Melee Amplifier here, which is just a blue weapon mod as we get increased melee damage. Really nothing here that matters. For the helmet, I go Fateful Strike, as this will increase our crit damage and crit rate. Mainly the crit rate here. The only downside is we don't benefit from weak spot damage. That's really only for the base bullets and not our Power Surge. So this is just really good to have here. For the mask, we go first Electrocution, as this will give us Power Surge ultimate damage with enemies without Power Surge status. And since the Power Surge status isn't applied, yet gets the targets with Power Surge thing, we are getting this damage boost all the time. For the top, I go Quick Comeback, as when you use a healing shot, you gain back your magazine, which is just easier than reloading. It's really flexible in here. You could also go with Rejuvenating, but with my HP build, I haven't made a good Rejuvenating, so I don't recommend it yet. So I'm not using it yet, but it's definitely something you can do. For the pants, we are going Deadshot, as this will increase our crit damage, and this will stay until we reload. So we are easily keeping this up, as with each crit hit process, and since we're always dealing crit hits, we will always have this active. Then with Lone Wolf Gloves, we have Crit Boost with the 15%. You could also go the Crit Amplifier. Since we have so much crit rate and sometimes you go over 100%, you'd have to math it out. We can give up 5% crit rate for 15% crit damage. I just don't do it on here because I don't have a good one, but it is something that I need to work on. Then for the boots, I go Covered Advance, as this will give us increased weapon and status damage, which is really good here, as this will just give us 2 great damage boosts. Status damage is the main thing I want for the Power Surge, but weapon damage with the bullets is also great. And so this will apply for 30 seconds. During those 30 seconds, if you take damage, it won't reset. If you take damage during that 4-second buildup, you will reset that. But it's pretty easy to not be in combat for 4 seconds, so it's not hard to do that. But if you're going low HP, you will want to look at Rush Hour, as with every 10% HP loss, you will gain 4% weapon and status damage. And if you're at low HP with the Treacherous stuff and the Lunar mods, then this will be the better option by like 8%. So with min-maxing, that is the better option. Alright, now with the Cradle, first we go Anti-Void, as that will increase damage with shotguns, and then you deal increased damage with Void enemies. This is unfortunate though, because it's already dealing damage to Void enemies, but you gotta get that increased damage. And then they go Rapid Aid for the increased medicine cooldown rate. Now if you're going with low HP, you could swap this over to Aerial Suppression, since I don't have it here right now. Then we also have Tactical Combo, which gains increased weapon damage when swapping weapons or reloading. This is also something you can move to Aerial Suppression for better survivability. Then we have Status Enhancement, where after hitting a weak spot, we will deal increased status damage. So even though we're not dealing weak spot damage, we still can hit weak spots. And so this is where you'll want to aim for a weak spot for this damage boost. Then we have Deviant Energy Defense, where you will summon a shield after activating your Deviation. And this will be based off 30% of your max HP, and you'll grant damage reduction as well. Then we have Tactical Leap, where every second spent airborne, we gain increased damage against deviants, and this stacks up to 60 seconds, so you only need to be airborne to stack it, but not airborne to use it. Then we have Elemental Sense. After dealing elemental damage, gain increased elemental damage with that element, so we'll be getting more shock damage. Then we have Transient Impact. Dealing power surge damage grants increased power surge damage for 6 seconds up to 10 stacks. Now with the food buffs, of course, first we're going over the almighty mixed fried hot dog, as we will get increased damage towards enemies affected by bullseye, which is in the against X enemies types. So this is just a really easy damage boost here. Now if you have a secondary food buff because of Chef, you could also go bone-in deviated sausage for increased damage against bosses, but that's only if you're doing bosses. Otherwise, you have some other options, like the Layered Galaxy, which gives increased elemental damage while airborne. Since we don't have much elemental damage, this is really good. You also have the Sparkling Pumpkin Soup, which increases power surge damage as well. And then we also have like stuff with crit damage with Stargazy Pie available, so there's a lot of secondary options available. And then for the drink, we are going to go Whimsical Drink, as this will increase our status damage by 25%. And then if you have a secondary option, you will want to go the Stardust Energy Drink to get a double jump, as this will allow us to be higher for that downstar bonuses. Alright, and now for the playstyle. First, you're going to want to make sure you have all your buffs active. I do not, as I just don't right now. I do have the double jump just because it's my main drink, so you'll see I can do that. But besides that, I have nothing else active for my food buffs, what normally you would. And then you'll want to make sure you have the gravity neutralizer ready and active. Then we are going to want to activate our deviation and then throw out our sticky ice crystal, heavy tech that while holding our secondary, activate our secondary, and then be airborne and start shooting. See, already in the first mag, we hit over 100k DPS. So we have a lot of damage here. That's pretty much it. We have like 100% crit rate unless we don't have all our buffs active, just really like Kukri. But besides that, like, we still have pretty constant crit rate. If you're looking at my bullets here, it's like 1 or 2 bullets that aren't getting crit damage. I hope you guys enjoyed the build video. If you have any questions or any suggestions for improvements, make sure to comment down below. This diverse formula and high damage makes this super easy to gear up and kill stuff fast. While it doesn't have any specific effects to help mobbing, it just kills fast enough to where it doesn't matter that it's a single target gun. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more Once Human content, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.